Alrighty. Hey gang, welcome back you guys. Another episode of Stove Chat. What is it, episode 12? I wrote it this morning, I can't remember, I think it is. How are you guys? How are you? Happy Wednesday everybody, nice to see you guys. Awesome, I see your guys' comments there. Carpenter Family, Belgian Gulch, Tall Shadow. Great to see you guys, man. Thank you so much for being here everybody, really appreciate it. How's the stream look? I'm still getting my bad status symbol, but it always... Oh, good. That's awesome. All right, Josh, great to see you again. Pablo, good morning. Marie, hi. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here. This is awesome. So, hope you guys have had a good week. I've had a great one. It's been pouring rain actually up until I guess just yesterday, and so I've been kind of just hunkering down. Felt kind of winterish, but it's been a good week. And now we're back in the sun, so I've been out attacking the willow overgrowth all morning and getting ready to do some brush hogging and firewood splitting this afternoon. So I hope you guys are having a good one. All right, I got a good status on my stream. Looks like we're up and running. Belgian Gulch says feed looks good here, so fantastic. Glad to hear it. Thank you for that, my friend. Appreciate it. Hey, Catapult Workshop, hello. So Pablo Cruz asks, are you selling fiberboard cores? And Pablo Cruz, I personally am not selling fiberboard cores, but my friend Luke at rocketstovecores.com is selling my design cores. We have a partnership going. He contacted me. I'd been wanting to do it forever, and I just have too many irons in the fire. And he reached out to me and said it was something that he had been thinking of, and I was like, man, I would just absolutely love it if there was a place that my customers could go and just buy a pre-cut core. So there is a place as of about 2 months ago, and so it doesn't go straight to me, but I do get a little bit, and Luke gets hopefully enough to cover all of his hard work and efforts, and he's a great guy, and I really, really encourage you to support him. I think, to be honest with you, unless you are in like a major metro area and you know where your ceramic fiberboard is and you have a good supplier, Luke's pricing is so good and his shipping is so reasonable, because so when he cuts it up, he breaks it down, right? So he can ship it in a regular size box, but when you buy it whole and flat, you pay through the nose through shipping. So I think buying a built core from him actually for a lot of people is going to come out equal or even cheaper than buying the raw material and building it yourself. Now that's not going to be the case if you're close to a supplier and can just go pick it up or something like that. But for a lot of people, his cores make a lot of sense. So I'm real excited about it. I've been, that's been one of the barriers to entry for a lot of people is where to get it. I don't know if I can build my own. A lot of people aren't comfortable building their own, or even, just the sourcing can be a problem. So I'm really excited about that. So I got some great emails from a lot of you folks who are here, and also just from my regular customers working on their builds this week, and I got some great stuff I'd like to go over, and I want to thank you guys sincerely for your emails and your questions. It really helps me keep the flow going and helps me with the content. I mean, that's really what I'm here for, is hopefully to be a resource for you guys. And what I'd love to see more of as we move farther along with this is hopefully my customers who are involved in current builds will start showing up and coming at me with some specific questions, because I think we could all learn from specific examples, real world examples that people run into in their builds, and how they overcome those challenges. So if you guys are on forums and communicating with people, please help spread the word about this, and let's get people who are building stoves to come use all of us as a resource, because it's not just me. I mean, I'm not, I am here as a resource, but what I'm really trying to do is our community as a resource, right? All of us in one place, able to kind of bounce ideas off each other and help out people who need it. So there you go. So there's that. Let me see if I can go to my emails. So I think, I'm still on the cellular internet. And Tall Shadow I really appreciate you guys. I mean, this is definitely a two-way street. So I can't tell you how much your guys' support has meant to be me over these past few weeks, and I really feel like we're going somewhere. So thank you guys. That definitely goes both ways. So all you guys. So I'm really happy about my internet, you guys. I am running on a cell SIM card chip way out here in my rural area. My DSL I upload at 0.3, and I got a speed test this morning. I was uploading at like 5 megabits per second, and so a lot better than I've done in the past. So Robin L, hello, good to see you, my friend. Hope you're doing great. So let's go back to these emails. So Carpenter family, I believe you sent me one right before we started. I won't say your first name, but it came from a certain carpenter. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it won't open. I don't know if that attachment is too big. Like I said, I'm using my cellular internet right now, so it could be something on my end. But for whatever reason, I've tried to open your email, and it just came up blank. So if you had some questions in there, send me a text-only one, and I'll answer. Or if you can tell me in the chat maybe what's going on here. And I apologize that it doesn't open. I'm not sure why that. Sometimes my email server seems a little funky with some attachments, so maybe it'll come online here as we talk. But at any rate, let's get into some other questions. So these questions come from Tall Shadow. So Tall Shadow, always learning. Nice to see you. All right, thanks for checking in. So these questions come from Tall Shadow, and Tall Shadow, I really appreciate your feeding me some questions and some content ideas. Helps me a lot. And let's get into this. Let's discuss what we're talking about. So, okay, Carpenter family, photo of your outdoor brick rocket stove remortared with my tips and some potatoes. Okay, awesome. That's kind of what I was thinking. Sometimes the photos, especially if they're big, my email won't even show me that it's trying to download it. So I imagine I probably can get it if I give it some time. Once I plug my regular internet back in. So, but thanks for sending that along. I really love seeing all your guys' photos. Pablo Cruz with a question. Thank you, Pablo. I really appreciate questions from the audience. That's totally what I'm here for. So please keep them coming, even though I'm going to fill in the gaps in between with the filler. So Pablo asks, can the Firebox be big, or is it all part of the sizing? And you know what, Pablo? Just fabulous question for the timing. I was just going to roll into another question that's similar to that, or that ties into that one. So the Firebox is very much a part of the combustion core sizing, and as a blanket rule, we usually are just going to say it absolutely should not be modified. Now, there's a few exceptions. Peter has played with his Firebox, and he's found he could make it a little bit deeper. Man, every time it's like it never fails. My phone doesn't ring until right now. I think it's probably going to go to my voicemail, and we're all going to get to listen to it if it's a real phone call. It's not. Sorry about that, you guys. So Peter has extended his Firebox, and he says you can go like 25% deeper, but not any other direction. And I do think that's true. He's done that with his Testo, and I wouldn't argue that. But I would say that for the most part, we really don't want to modify the Firebox size if efficiency is one of our primary goals. You know, if you care about the thing running the way it was designed to, then changing Firebox size really changes the ratios of fuel to air greatly. You can all of a sudden have much more fuel within that space. Even just a little bit of volume makes a pretty significant difference. And also the air flow through, over, around that fuel changes considerably. And you come out with a totally different set of ratios with regards to the volume of your air Firebox, which kind of is your carburetor, right? And so you change the ratios of that to everything downstream, and it really throws things for a loop. So the best advice is don't modify any part of the combustion core. Now, with that said, if you're an experimenter and you're not terribly concerned about efficiency, which if you aren't, I don't know why you're here, but if that was the case, people do experiment with larger Fireboxes, and there have been some minor successes for the most part. None of them will hold up to a testo, though. It really pretty impacts efficiency numbers pretty quickly and pretty dramatically. You might not see it. You might not see smoke, but you'll be going downhill. So there's that on the Firebox sizing. And Sally Mufari, hello, nice to see ya. And rockets are all about the proportions. Correct, is what Sally Mufari asks. And yes, Sally Mufari, you're exactly right. They're all about the proportions. And as soon as you change that Firebox size, those proportions are all out of whack. And like I said, the best analogy is that it's really the carburetor of your combustion system. And so changing proportions there really will have negative effects. So Sally Mufari says, I've seen some people adding a small enlargement between the Firebox and the riser tube, creating a place for secondary combustion. Any thoughts? Yeah, so Sally Mufari, that's a great one you brought up there. So years ago on Donkey's board, we had a conversation, and it was, I believe, Lasse who talked about a fellow in Alaska who had put like a vertical upside down section coming up off the top of the burn tunnel. So you got your feed tube and your riser and your burn tunnel in between, and he had just made a vertical, like a camel's hump in the middle of the burn tunnel, and he called it the capacitor. And his idea was that the hot gases were going to go up in there, and they were going to kind of cool, and as they cooled, they would be reintroduced to this really hot stream, and in that way, he would burn off. He would have a second opportunity to burn off these gases that were unburnt. And to be honest with you, my riserless core actually incorporates a component of that idea that came from that dialogue. And that event or when we were talking about that, it wasn't really intentional. I mean, it came about as the way the bricks went together, but it does end up having basically a little bit of a higher ceilinged chamber with a lower exit in the combustion zone, and I do feel like that sends the hottest gases up there. Which, maybe you want the hottest gases to stay in the combustion zone and help things burn. So I don't know. It could go either way, but you can talk your way into any of this stuff being good, right? So I don't have any hard science as to whether or not that's going to be awesome. But okay, so not what you meant. So let's see. You're meaning after the box on the way. Oh, well, in a J-tube, I was just describing a J-tube. So you'd have the Firebox, riser, and in between, that's where that hump was. So that is what I think we're talking about, the same location. But at any rate, it doesn't matter. I think that that probably, sticking to the design parameters is the way you're going to get the best guaranteed results. And the chances of adding a little raised section or any shape change to a core and making an improvement are probably like 0.001%. It's just been so refined and really picked over with the testos, and small changes make huge differences. So I feel like it's probably about as good as it can get. I would not recommend trying to modify cores to better performance. Modify cores for your pleasure and for experimentation purposes. By all means, play with them, but don't build one that's modified and think that you made an improvement over the standard, because it's really unlikely. And I don't mean that in any rude way. I learned that the hard way myself, because my favorite thing is to think that I can, there's got to be a better way, right? So anyways, so on to questions from Tall Shadow. So Tall Shadow asks about a bypass, which this is a great question, Tall Shadow. He says, in regards to a bypass, is the general rule of thumb to make it CSA the same as a system CSA, or better if it's larger? Excuse me. And that's such a great question, and I get this all the time. And it's another one that comes up often because there's a hope. Well, it's not that it comes up often, but I answer it often because it's a specific question with regards to what your goals are. So some people have really specific goals about cooking. They want to build a cook stove or a rocket stove that they can cook on in the summer without heating up their house. that's one of the functions of a bypass. Well, another function of the bypass is to allow for cold starts, or easy starts in varying conditions, I should say. Another function of a bypass is to allow for a larger system size, and this kind of ties back into cold starts, but a larger system size and allows you to bring a large system up to temp online without suffering smoke back. So I think those are the main reasons for a bypass, right? To allow you to control cooking and stove body temperatures, to allow for ease of startups, whether it's because of temperature conditions or whether it's because of your build's structure. So the question is how big should that bypass be? And my answer is it really depends on why it's there and what your goals are. So for most of us, it's not really usually the first reason I gave. It's not usually the cooking reason. For most of us, the only reason we have a bypass there is to help us start it up in tricky conditions, and maybe to help heat up a large bench, still start up in tricky conditions. So in those instances, Tall Shadow, honestly, I often use bypasses that are smaller than system CSA. So I don't believe that a bypass needs to be the equivalent of system CSA in order to function as a startup bypass. I don't know what the minimum is. There definitely is a minimum. But my feeling is, as long as I can shunt some of my hot gases directly to the chimney and drive draft, that's all I need to do. I don't need to ensure they all can go there. And there's not going to be restriction because my bypass doesn't shut off the alternative pathway. It just opens one to the chimney. So I still have free flow through my normal system plus some direct drive to the chimney. So the CSA can be smaller. Now, if you're wanting to cook in the summer and you don't want to heat the body of the stove, then that's a different story. Then absolutely, minimum size must be system size. So your CSA should be the same as your 6-inch chimney, roughly 29 square inches. Or larger, if you really want to make sure you shunt all of the gases out the chimney. Although I don't know that much larger is really going to be a big benefit. But that's my take on bypasses, and I'll add to that because there's another component of that. So I just talked about how we don't need it to be full size. My other feeling is that we don't need it to be hermetically sealed. It doesn't need to be hypercritical, and I think I've talked about this before in terms of the seal around it. I've talked to some builders who felt like it just absolutely had to be, tucked up as tight as possible. They wanted sealing rope around it and an airtight seal because anything that escaped out of there was escaped efficiency, and that's true, and I can't argue with that. But I think it comes at such an enormous cost of attention to detail. And as you guys know, I'm, one for easy builds that function as a first and foremost. And my feeling has always been that if that bypass closes and it just has some little gaps around it, just nothing big, but little, those are going to plug themselves. You know how we're always talking about how important system size is, or it presents a restriction, and that any restrictions will eventually plug themselves. And so I feel the same way with your bypass. It's going to kind of work fly ash and stuff into all the gaps around it. So my opinion is don't sweat those bypasses too much. You've seen the way I build them. I'm not really, paying the most attention to detail there. I'm usually just trying to get some kind of flap in there to close off most of the flow. Because once you've closed off most of the flow, then it's just going to have to go around the other way. And once the draft establishes going the other way, there won't be much going through those little gaps anyways, because there's just the pull is going around the horn. So there's the bypass talk. I'm going to go back to get caught up on your comments now. So cross-sectional area. Yes, thank you, Carpenter Family, for the definition. Sorry, always learning. I was so wrapped up. I didn't come back and get you caught up. Smaller bypass would encourage a split so that the heat also takes the longer path. Yes, the idea is not to encourage a split, but only just to get us primed, get our chimney primed. But in practice, yes, it will encourage a split. Now, we don't ever really want to talk about a split flue path is a good thing, because eventually one's going to prioritize. And that's what I was just getting at, was if you close your bypass and it has a couple leaks around it, you're going to start flowing around the way the path of least resistance through your large CSA, and eventually that's going to be the hottest path, so the gases are going to go that way. So eventually it'll prioritize, and it will stop going through your leaky bypass entirely. And so that's really the deal with a split path, is that we're using it. It's okay in the bypass to have that smaller CSA, because we're just sort of trying to get some into the chimney. But keep in mind that I'm only talking about this property in use of a bypass. You wouldn't really want to have split flue for any other purposes. So Tall Shadow says, for me, bypass would be 99% for cold startups. Exactly, Tall Shadow. That's for most of us. That's the case. I do get, so that's why I brought up the other one, because I get those emails from the folks who live, homestead style in places where it's real cold in the winters and real hot in the summers. It's not like that here where I am. But I think a lot of you folks are familiar with places like that, whether it's, usually it's just somewhere just east of the Rockies, whether you're in the mountains still or on the plains, but you'll have 90-degree days in the summer and cold nights up here up at elevation, 100-degree days. And so cooking a little bit in the morning is no big deal, but if the bricks were warm, it'd be a problem. So I get a lot of those emails. And so for those folks, we want to make sure we use big bypasses, and we can even use extra insulation in some of the upper parts of the stove body to try and keep the masonry from retaining any heat. Because like I said, you can cook in the morning, you can cook in the evening, no problem. But if your bricks are warm all day, not fun. So coming back up to the comments here, smaller bypass. Oh, let's see, I already did that one. So Pablo says, I keep forgetting that they are so efficient. Can't get my head around small burns. I keep falling back to think I need a bigger firebox. Need to build and get used to working the stove. Yeah, Pablo, don't beat yourself up, man. So it's one of the reasons why I'm here and why I feel like this dialogue is so important, is because it's so hard to put your head into the rocket stove space until you've kind of lived with one for a little while. And those are such normal thoughts, like, okay, how am I going to get 8 hours of burn out of this thing? I'm going to have to stay warm all night. And you haven't lived with it, and so you forget, or you just don't really put much stock in the masonry keeping things warm. And it's very different than any other wood burning paradigm that I experienced prior to having one. So yeah, really common. They're super efficient. They work on small burns. The idea is burn as hot and fast as you can, and then harvest that heat and store it so you can, extract it later as you need it. It's really different from a smolder, constant output heat type burn that we get from our metal box stoves. So, but good observation there. So let's see. Carpenter family, I'm not sure what that's referring to. Bypass temp is for starting. Cooking option is nice to know about. Yeah, you're welcome. That it's like I said, it's one of those ones that for me, I had thought of it, but I'd kind of just been like, it's not that important. But then there's people emailing me going, this is really important to me. New Mexico, people there, another great example. It's going to be 40 degrees in the morning, and it's going to be 100 degrees by noon or whatever, and they're fine cooking their eggs and they're heating up their coffee over some fire, and in the morning. It's nice, even it takes the chill off. So really important function there. So on to the second question. Sorry for my long-winded approach, boys. I know I take some time here. So in the second question, Tall Shadow asks, I can see that in certain builds the placement of the heater may not be close to the chimney where a bypass could be installed. What would be recommended in this case? And I'm going to come back. Augustus, good to see you. How you doing on this Wednesday, my friend? Augustus asks, I see you offer designs with both insulated brick and CFB. Are there benefits to both choices, or is CFB the way of the future? That's a great question, Augustus. Let me answer that, Augustus, and then I'll answer you, Augustus, and then Tall Shadow, I'll come back to the bypass talk. So, Augustus, my feeling is that CFB and IFB, insulated fire brick, aka kiln brick, or ceramic fiberboard, my feeling in terms of performance is that they're equal. My feeling in terms of durability is that The insulated fire brick is better for Firebox abrasion durability. Have the one in my house now is 5 years old, I think, and has renters in it for the last 4 years, and it's holding up great. I mean, there's a little, concavity forming, but it's so minor. I mean, it does wear. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it'll be decades before I even think about replacing those bricks. CFB, on the other hand, you probably want to put some temporary cheeks in there. If you just have CFB, they'll wear out probably seasonally. Not a big deal to me for the performance gains, but as you guys know, I've done some stuff to come up with alternatives. Split fire bricks, my RA330 liner. There's a few choices you can make there. So IFB, CFB performance standpoint, equal durability standpoint, IFB I think is the winner a little bit. From a buildability standpoint, stacking bricks is easy, cutting fiberboard is easier. Probably about 6 one, half dozen the other. Cost standpoint, CFB typically is going to be less expensive if you were to buy them new. But IFB you can often find salvage, like in kiln bricks or from an old pottery location of some description. There's a lot of that stuff around. So 6 one, half dozen the other, really. I didn't choose one over the other. The IFB is something some people have from salvage, so it's a great choice. I don't know that I'd go buy them. They're usually pretty dang expensive. They're like $8 or $9 a piece often, and a core, I don't remember, but I think my core was like 80 of them. I mean, you'd be deep in the costs to build that thing. So Sally Mufari asks, is there coating or glazing for IFB or CFB to improve surface durability? And my answer is no. You'll get, and I apologize, it's a great question, Sally Mufari. It's a great question, and I apologize. I come out a little aggressive about it because it's been a common question for years and years and years, and there's a really important underlying fundamental principle about why it won't work. And the reason is that the CFB or the IFB as a substrate is just too soft. So even if you can get, this, and water glass, Carpenter family, great idea. It's the one everyone thinks of. Can we put sodium silicate, and make an eggshell type, shell over these softer materials? And the answer is you can, and the reason why it doesn't work very well was in my description, and it's because you just get an egg. The problem is the underlying materials are too soft. So anything you bond to them and give them a hard outer shell is only going to crack into them as they fail under compression strength. Fail under compression, right? So as soon as a piece of wood hits them, the underlying substrate compresses, and so that's useless, in my opinion. Oh, sorry, I hope that didn't make a big loud noise. A lot of people try it. I think it's throwing good money after bad and a waste of time. You're just going to wear them down. I think the biggest thing is to accept it. Put in temporary cheeks if it bothers you. Like I said, I feel like the performance of bare ceramic fiberboard is worth the wear. It's so easy to replace. A little piece this big on each side of the thing isn't going to cost you very much each year. $10, $20, I don't know, not much. And the performance is unbelievable. You can stick your hand in there when it's hot as heck and load stuff. I mean, it doesn't spit smoke at you, and I really like it from a performance standpoint, but it does wear. So my ultimate is that RA330 Firebox liner, the steel liner. I think Firebrick splits are a great choice if you don't have access to the RA330. And again, I think the best thing is just running them bare gently, loading your wood, at least for a season, and see how you do it. Because then you can evaluate, and maybe put some fire bricks in there, and just evaluate for yourself what's important. Now, if you have company using it, or if it's in a rental house or something like that, you definitely want to put some fire bricks or something in there. So hope that helps. So Sally Mufari says, I imagine it resembles acoustic tile surfaces and how that surface affects its properties. I think so, Sally Mufari. I think that's exactly what those coatings are. They can greatly change the functional, parameters of that surface, but they can't change the underlying structure, right? So it's still just gonna, and it's the same thing that goes back to secondary air and why we can't use ceramic and things there. There's just too much beating and banging around in there for those kinds of fragile constructions. So bypass quarter to half of CSA would work too, asks Leon. And yeah, Leon, I think it would. If all we're trying to do is get the chimney heated up, I think so. Now, at some point, there is a minimum size. And the minimum size, you know, we're putting it in ratios, saying a quarter to half. Well, a quarter of an 8-inch system would probably work. But a quarter of a 6-inch system, we're starting to get to the point where, you know, when we have small holes, we have the boundary layer all around them that doesn't really move. There's tons of friction between this layer of air and the between the outer, you know, skin and the inner layer of air, and it's exponentially, you know, slowing down as you get closer to the walls from a central flow point. And basically, as you get smaller and smaller, you kind of end up with no flow in the middle here because these areas are all affected by the boundary. So, in other words, yeah, there is a realistic minimum. That's what I'm trying to say, Sully Mafari, and I don't know what that is, and it's going to depend on the situation. But yeah, you know, you definitely kind of just want to, let's just say, like, you don't really want any gap to get much smaller than 2 inches in any dimension, and even that's pretty small. I would maybe 3 inches. At that point, you're starting to put a restriction on it. So hopefully that helps you understand that. So Robin L. asks, inside the barbecue oven, my barbecue design, which exits to flue and exit to heat storage bench, both at same vertical level in the oven, can the bypass be a piece of CFB or brick that can be manually removed, or choose one exit or the other, or a bit of both? I got you, Robin. Great question. Yes. Love your way of working through these problems and finding these simple solutions. Great solution. Exactly what I did in my tiny stove. For me, my tiny stove has 2 exits down low, one over on the right side and one over here, one going to the bench, one going to the exhaust. And when I first built it, I would just go in through the oven and just put a brick there, a couple bricks there, a piece of CFB, and just choose, you know, because I wasn't switching them in use for the most part. It was like summer ops, I just didn't have the bench going, so I'd block it off over there, or partially. And in your case, if it's an oven that you're going to be opening, and you can open and close when the stove's running, you know, you just might need to open the bypass or wait till the fire dies down. But absolutely, you can go inside there and adapt your, you know, change your bypass routing from the inside without having a flap or any kind of articulating lever, and just doing it manually. And that's a totally acceptable way to go. And I actually think it's a great way to start, because it'll teach you how your tuning is going, you know, what conditions do what. Maybe some things need changing, maybe they don't, but that's a great way to start. And I did that in my tiny stove here for, I think, the whole first year. I just did my bypass that way. So Augustus says, so it seems like air friction along surfaces is greater than most people would think. Should I worry about gaps in my heat riser due to poor craftsmanship? Augustus, great question again, and it goes back to my gaps question from the other last week, and it's one of the reasons why I don't typically worry about gaps, and why I just talked about why I don't really worry about gaps in my bypass. Like, I don't worry if it seals all the way close, because there's a lot of restriction. Exactly, the boundary layers. A really small hole kind of presents itself as no hole at all to these flowing gases. Now, all that said, things change when you have dramatic pressure differences on either side of a gap. And in the case of a heat riser, that is probably the one place where gaps are going to make the biggest difference, and it will have a downside for sure. And what that's going to do is, as you probably know, velocity in fluids equals pressure, right? So if gases, and I say fluids because gases is fluid dynamics, but if gases are moving at a high velocity, higher, you know, the gases, let's say 2 separate chambers with different velocities of gases. The gases moving at the higher velocity have the lower pressure. I apologize, I said that the wrong way. I said that backwards. So, and I could be using my terminology a little bit wrong. I definitely am no true scientist. But at any rate, the principle is correct. And so inside the riser, you've got really fast gas movement. As we come out of the riser, we usually enter a big bell and things slow down exponentially. And so in other words, you have very low pressure inside that riser compared to outside the riser. So even small gaps, you will get injected gases from externally from the riser. And the problem is that those are going to be exponentially cooler than the gases in the riser. So you're going to be quenching your combustion a little bit. So is it going to wreck your stove? Probably not. Is anyone ever going to notice? Probably not. But it is probably hurting your efficiency a little bit. So hope that helps. So Silly Mufari says that was part of the original island stove. Yes, it was, Silly Mufari. Exactly. Yes. Great memory. So Leon Kripp asks, does 1-inch CFB wear after a year or two of heavy use need to be replaced in 1 to 2 years' time? So Leon, only in the wood feed area. Only in the firebox. And if you were gentle, it wouldn't wear that much. I mean, eventually we just all have a time when we're jamming some wood in on top of a load of coals, and that's what does the damage. So it's surprising how much beating on, it can take. It does start dinging and chipping, but it actually takes quite a while to wear through a 1-inch piece. I've done it. I wore all the way through my cheeks. I call them the cheeks inside the firebox. I just use replacement boards and just keep adding new ones each year. Until I got my liner. And I wore all the way through. It took like over a season. I think I was well into my second season. But yeah, they'll wear out. So Robin L., that answered your question. Great. Glad to hear it. Let's see. Tall Shadow says, I painted on a coat of thinned out fire cement on my bricks for abrasion. And like Matt said, it fell off because the underlying material couldn't hold it. Yeah, Tall Shadow. It's a real common thing. I learned it because I did it too. I had these real hard refractory, castable refractory, and I was trying to put it over in a thin coat over an insulative layer, and it didn't take me long to figure out that I was just creating eggshells. So it's a really, really common pitfall, and there's a real obvious answer as to why it won't work. So Sally Mufari says gases follow most fluid dynamics principles from a physics standpoint, just much less viscous. Yeah, right, Sally Mufari. I mean, I knew that for the most part, that we mostly can use fluid dynamic principles, and then at some important points there's a breakdown in terms of the way they move in free space, I think. But Belgian Gulch, I'm a rocket scientist. Yeah, not the traditional sense, but I'll take it. I appreciate it. Man, rocket scientist. Speaking of which, how cool was that space launch the other day, man? I just thought that was so awesome. So anyways, going back to your guys' questions, I want to get back to Tall Shadow's bypass questions, because really good is the next one. I thought was really great. So it was in certain builds, the placement of a heater may not be very close to the chimney where a bypass could be installed. What would be recommended in this case? A separate pipe. And so we talked a little bit about this last week. In some builds, you can sort of break the build into sections, and you could have a bypass from section 1 into section 2, and a bypass from section 2 into section 3, and in that way you could sort of sequentially have a free path up to a chimney. That would be a case of a stove and a taller bell and then a chimney. That's not always going to be possible. If the reason for the bypass is just for startups, and if you cannot place the chimney adjacent to the core to help you with startups, to allow you a startup bypass, then my next choice is going to be to allow a priming area in the bottom of the chimney. So if I have a build, let's say it's a traditional cob flue run build, and my J-tube firebox is way over there, and my end of my bench is way over there, and the chimney comes out over there, I'm going to put a T in the bottom of that chimney with a cap on it. And I'm going to use that when I light the J-tube. I'm going to start every fire. I'm going to start by pulling that cap, putting newspaper in that priming tube, and I'm going to light a small fire in the chimney before I light the fire, or at the same time as I light the fire in the J-tube. And in that way, I'm going to prime my chimney and hopefully get draft going. So those are the best choices in my opinion. Tall Shadow in terms of if you can't have a bypass easily installed. And honestly, these days, I'm not really accepting too many excuses anymore. People will say, I want the chimney over there, and I want the stove over here. And I say, well, we're going to put an elbow off the top of the chimney, off the top of the stove, and we're going to head over to where you want your chimney exit. Because what we're not going to do is smoke out your house every time you start the stove. You're going to hate this thing. So I'm getting to the point where I'm sort of insisting on there being some way to make this work. Now, some people are okay with like having it happen outside. So you can put like a lower chimney and a upper T going into it, and then have flaps out there that they can go change. So there's a few ways to do it, but I'm always going to try and have something. In worst case scenario, I'm going to put a priming T in there under the chimney. So hopefully that answered that question, Tall Shadow. So I'm going to come back up to the chat here a little bit. And Always Learning says, any discussion of a ceramic catalytic converter in or near the riser could add the desired turbulence to? Maybe. That's a great question, Always Learning. I'll come back to that. Let me read through these and make sure I'm not missing any. So Robin, I think that's a new question. I just skipped over it because I thought it was your same as your other question, but maybe it's not. Let's see. I got to go back up here and get caught up. Okay, so Robin says, can the exit from a warming bench be to the same flue pipe as the oven exit, just with another lower entrance into the flue? The oven gas's exit could be encouraging. Yes, Robin. Yes. Love to see it. You're getting such a great handle on it. It's really awesome. So yeah, that's the ideal situation. That's what we want to have happen, is to have them all those entrances basically stacked into a single chimney entrance. And in my tiny stoves, that chimney, actually I think in your oven too, that chimney can be that brick column that we just can build it internally all the way down to where we need it to go. And in that way, it can be the exit from the bench, it can be the exit from the oven, and then we can have a bypass if we wanted to, even way up high in the top of the oven, going back into it. So you could have 3 entrances into it, and then all we really need is a crossover from the oven into the bench, so that we can close off the entrances to the chimney from the oven, and then it will have to go through the bench and up there. So that's, Robin, you're nailing it, and I'm so pleased, because I had an image in my head ever since you sent me your first idea, and you purchased those 2 sets of plans. Thank you very much, by the way. Ever since we had that conversation, I've had this image in my mind of how I think it might go. But I need you to put it together in your head too, because that way you're going to put the elements kind of where you want them, and then we can talk about if it's possible, and I can make small changes. But great job. You've got a really good handle on it. So Always Learning, to your ceramic catalytic converter question. So catalytic converters are a consumable item used in modern wood stoves that allow the combustion of certain elements within the flue gas, dangerous, things that we want to burn off. It allows the combustion of those at lower temperatures than would ordinarily be possible via the catalyst, thus the catalytic converter. So rocket stoves don't really need those, because we don't ever burn at low temps, and we don't want to burn at low temps. So catalytic converters are good for box stoves where you kind of you get that thing up to 800 degrees, and then you shut everything down and you just kind of keep it simmering there at 800 degrees. But with rocket stoves, 800 degrees, we're not even getting started. We're like 1200 degrees kicking off in the back of the mixing zone and the combustion zone, and on our way up to 2000 degrees, and we're well into the area of where we can combust those things that a catalytic converter is designed to. So I don't think that we'd get much advantage out of a catalytic converter, and to be honest with you, I think we'd just burn it up. Now, that's not to say there aren't some potential gains to be made by putting one of those, like maybe it can flip into the exhaust, like a lot of wood stoves have that, where they roll in and out of the exhaust. So maybe it could flip into your exhaust at a certain part of the burn and try and pick up some pieces of the puzzle that we're missing. but boy, we're really, 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 really clean and efficient right now. It would be, you'd be going for that last nth of you'd be trying to squeeze out that last little bit of efficiency. And as you know, that last bit comes at a high cost. And so you'd have a lot of design costs and parts costs. And I just don't think you'd get much out of it, to be honest with you. I could be wrong. It might be worth playing with. But you're going to add, a replaceable item that has a significant cost every year. I don't think you're going to get much out of it. That's my take on it. So Sally Mufari talking about my bench and bell design, and not sure if I covered something. I'm going to go back up. Always learning. Oh yeah, catalytic converter. We just did that. So Sally Mufari, I'm not sure what that was in reference to. It might have been the bench gases exiting and things like that. I think it was. So Augustus says, thanks for adding the links in the video description to common stove parts. You're welcome. One of my projects I've been working on. I spent actually a lot of time the other week doing that. And you guys feel free to please use my referral links as much as you can. They do help me out quite a bit. So click through those to go buy your fish food or whatever else you're buying on Amazon. It helps me out. It doesn't cost you anything extra. So but I appreciate that made a difference for you, Augustus. Can I add something for the stove doors you discussed in past episodes? I can't see that they're sold in the US. Yes, Augustus, I can. The biggest problem there is I definitely can. So I'm going to tell you right now, northstoneheat.com. northstoneheat.com. Lovely mom and pop shop, literally at their home in Vancouver, Washington. Sue is the mom who runs it, and she's wonderful. They just have like a little garden shed in back of their home, and they run this little business selling masonry, heater, hardware, and parts, ceramic fiber and felt and doors and things like that. So they carry Pisla doors, Pisla doors from Finland. You can go to Pisla's website and see different options. You can go to northstoneheat.com website, see the parts they offer, and then you can call Sue and she'll give you shipping quotes and things like that. And she's really nice. Just tell her that you've been talking to me, and she'll make you a great deal and take good care of you. So, but I'll try and put a link to Northstone Heat as well. There are some I've kind of been looking for some alternative doors and stuff that I could put an Amazon link to. I haven't found any great ones, but I'll keep looking for stuff like that, I guess, and I'll keep you posted as I do. I found some stuff on there that I thought was just great, like cheap wood racks and things like that. And those are things that most rocket stove people don't always think of, but something to keep your wood off the ground and actually getting dry is really an important part of owning a rocket stove. So there's some other stuff in there too, and I did link a Testo in there if anyone wants to spend a bunch of money on a Testo. There's the best Testo for rocket stoves is linked in there as well. So Sally Mufari says the catalyst is consumed in the process then. Yes, Sally Mufari. They are consumables. They usually are a little like a metal ring, and they have, I think it's platinum in there. That's the catalyst that burns off, is consumed. You know how a catalyst process works. I think it gives off a molecule of itself to add a molecule of carbon or something. Fire off the combustion. There's my lack of science for you again. I understand the basics, but not what's really going on there. But yeah, they are consumables. So Leon says, have I come across people experimenting on drip feed diesel or veg oil? May require a blower to atomize oil, and I know this is dangerous, but sometimes it's easier by diesel. And I'm laughing, Leon, because it's awesome. I love it. My home has a diesel furnace. I haven't used it for over 10 years, but when I first moved in, I spent a lot of time blowing out nozzles and repriming, and I don't even remember all this stuff I was doing. It was awful, and I always smelled like diesel. But I learned a lot about burning diesel, and I sort of got an interest in it. And when I salvaged that old furnace out of my stove, I thought about putting a drip burner into my shop. And following that train of thought, I have seen, and I can't remember where, but we had some great dialogue. It might have been on my old permsteading site. Somebody has successfully done a drip diesel J-tube. And I think now that we're talking about that, it was on my perm steading site. And if I remember correctly, what the fella did was he actually had he preheated the fuel using the barrel with a copper coil. I don't know how much it went around the barrel. I think he had it down low so it wasn't real hot. Manny, good to see you, dude. Manny, do you remember that diesel drip? Was that on perm steading? Tell me if it was. Someone had a diesel drip, and basically they preheated the diesel with the barrel, if I remember correctly, and then they just positioned the copper coil like a couple feet above the J-tube, and it just dripped right into the J-tube. So it was kind of like atomizing on its way down, and then it would hit that firebox, and or maybe the drip was right into the feed. I don't remember, but it was but basically it wasn't waste oil alone. It was sort of like a waste oil supplement to his rocket burning. I don't think he ever got it to burn on just waste oil, but it would just drip his waste oil into the firebox as he was burning gas, and it was pretty cool. And Leon, that's the best I can tell you. I've only seen that. I think if you were going to try and do it where you were just burning diesel, you would need... I've spent some time commercial fishing, long-lining halibut in Alaska, and we always had little diesel cookers on the boat, little diesel, heater ovens, and they usually have like a little... You've probably seen them, like a little cup tray for the fuel, and the idea is you get that thing heated up, preheated, and it starts to atomize the fuel. I think you could possibly look at some of those burner elements and cobble together something similar for a rocket stove, but I got a feeling that the draft, that high draft is going to be an issue. You're going to blow it out a lot. So it seems like kind of dropping the fuel into the going rocket is your best choice. But that's what all I got for that. I think it's worth playing with. I don't think it's that dangerous, to be honest with you. I mean, diesel's pretty safe. It's hard to blow yourself up with it, I think. So I'm going to go back here to another Tall Shadow question. And he says, it's been stated over the years that a metal barrel is important in the functioning of an RMH since it depends on the heat differential between the inside and outside of the heat riser to make it draft correctly. And how does replacing the metal barrel with masonry of some sort work? Does the draft entirely depend on the chimney? So, such a great question. Another one, Tall Shadow. Very, very, very good question. And again, and you comment on it. You say, I think this all came out before your riserless core and bypasses were not common in a standard J2 build, and that's right. So that theory of cooling gases and, the differential driving the draft, I'm not going to call BS on it, but I'm going to say that, do you remember last week we talked about Yonto and the horizontal exhaust, and how the very first, most of our first introduction to rocket stove world was through Yonto. And so we got a lot of these concepts sort of ingrained in us that really only apply to his goals. So if your goal is to have like the highest efficiency stove that exhausts sideways out your house like a dryer, then I think that those things do matter. I think that the difference in the barrel temp and the riser temp, and you're trying to cool it and compress it, because basically from the top of the riser, in a build like that, like with a horizontal exit, we're going to try and go downhill from the riser all the way out the chimney, the exhaust, and so in those cases, I think that differential is important all the way through. It's your delta T. It's the same thing we have driving draft in chimneyed stoves, only it's the opposite. You want the reverse delta. You want the coolest and the hottest, right? Cooler going out. Belgian Gulch, I was just going to get to your questions. I am going to get to them, so you'll just have to come back and catch up. So thanks for being here, my friend. So with regards to the barrel and the cooling, and is that an important part of a rocket mass heater? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no, not in the paradigm that we live in now. We have now pretty much all accepted that you need adequate draft in the chimney to have a rocket stove that functions in a way that's going to be acceptable to most people. Walter Vaughn, good to see you. So most people really need chimney draft, because otherwise they're going to have a finicky stove and they're going to have back puffing and smoking out the top. So I think it's really not very important that the barrel creates downdraft in there. I think what's really important is that we get enough heat into the chimney to create draft and drive the whole system from end to end. As a matter of fact, I don't think that temperature differential in the barrel, and I don't think that has any role to play in a functioning rocket stove with a good chimney, because once you have that draft in the chimney, that's your driving force. So I think a lot of that old information is really specific to what their goals and their applications were. And it's one of the biggest reasons why I always talk about our rocket stove build parameters within the function of our goals, because you can't separate them. You have to know what you want to do before you can say something's good or better. And it's one of my biggest frustrations with some rocket stove information sources out there, is they pick sides and they say this is better or this is the way to do it. And I don't think there's any one way. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So I'm going to come back up and catch up with you guys here. Shop J-Tube might have had waste oil from time to time, says Belgian Gulch. I don't know if you're here anymore, but I think I remember you doing some of that, my friend, and I think that's why I thought it was a diesel shop. Sally Mafari says, I've seen a good deal of waste oil burners being dangerous if the oil doesn't fully burn and is allowed to pool. That's a good point, Sally Mafari, and I had forgotten about that, and you're absolutely correct. It's got to be burning on its way in. If it does, if you just have like a surface burn over a big pool of oil, it can be very dangerous. I remember Honeydew talking on insulating the chimney tube between the double walls. Thoughts? So, again, it depends on what your goals are and what we're talking about. If it's a pre-built double wall chimney, there's no need. It's got air in between. That's all you need. If you can build a double wall chimney that has an adequate airspace in between, I don't think you need insulation in between there. All insulation are just efforts to trap air. So if you got air that you can trap in there and keep it from moving, then that's probably pretty good insulation. However, easy way to build your own insulated chimney is to take two stovepipes of different dimensions, a 6-inch and an 8-inch, put them together, and then you can fill the gap around the outside with like perlite or ceramic wool or anything like that. And in that way you can build your own double wall insulated chimney. And that's a great way to go. So you can, because buying insulated chimney is not cheap. So you can definitely build your own and do a good, do it nicely using that technique. So hope that helps. So I'm going to catch up over here with Belgian Gulch's questions. I didn't get to them before he left. I apologize, my friend, but I'm going to try and answer them for you here and now. Sally Mufari, I was going to. I remember that if you can't see something nice, don't say anything at all. And I was going to comment on Honeydew and just encourage you guys to watch it with a grain of salt, because aircrete is really a terrible material for building rocket stove anything. And I just really would encourage you to not do that. I'll just come right out and say it. Don't use aircrete, please. Please don't copy Honeydew Carpenter, please. Thank you. I think you'll be much happier for it. So Asbjorn says, I'm trying to understand draft. Apparently, as I understand, 100 Celsius pulls not twice as much as 50 Celsius as I would have thought. More like 50%, something about density. One little Indian, I'm so glad. Thank you. That honey, don't. That's he seems like a really nice person. I think this heart is totally in the right place. I just, they're new to rocket stoves. They're very encouraging of, anyways, I'm just going to drop it. So, Asbjorn, draft is tricky. There's a whole lot of variables you got to remember. So, you were just talking about 100C pulls not twice as much as 50C. Well, did you have the same differences outside? Because, that's going to be a big part of that. You've got to talk about the temperature of your gases inside, and then you've got your gases outside. You've got the delta, the difference between those. But it's more than just the temperatures, right? Because you've also got to keep in mind your air pressure, which is going to change dynamically moment to moment. your restriction within your house with where the draft is coming from. Yeah, one Lindian well said, honeydew will experiment on somebody's house and it's dangerous. I mean, this is it. They're just sharing a whole lot of untested stuff. I mean, I've tested it 10 years ago. I can tell you it doesn't work, but they don't know that, and they're sharing it as if it's the magic bullet. They're also just big, heavy cores that aren't really insulated. They're high mass. They're probably super inefficient. I have so many issues with what they share that I don't even know where to start. So, look like nice people, terrible rocket stove builders. I'll just say that. So Asbjorn, draft, I don't know if I can really help you understand it, other than to say that what you need is enough. And what that is going to change from day to day and moment to moment, whether your door's open or your door's closed, whether your fuel is birch or alder, there's just a whole lot of different things that can change, the way your stove drafts at any given moment. I mean, moisture is a huge one. Humidity. If your stove is real cold, it's been sitting, you could have moisture soaked into the bricks when you start it up. All of a sudden you have pretty good temperature differential, but there's a huge load of moisture in the flue gas coming out of the stove, and as it gets higher up, it starts to condense. So there's a lot of elements to draft, and I don't know if I can help you any more than that. But if you have specific questions, please ask, and I'll answer. So I'm going to come back to Belgian Gulch's question. So he asked about adding fire clay and sand to pre-mix refractory, and he says that he heard me mention it somewhere, and I don't remember mentioning that, but I would like to say that I don't recommend mixing fire clay and sand with pre-mixed refractory. I feel really strongly about, as you guys know, my fire clay and sand mortar as being a great mortar for all rocket stove building unless it's outside in the elements. If you add any premix refractory to that, all you're going to do is create a setting mortar, and you're going to set yourself up for expansion cracks that are hard to seal, set yourself up for repairs being really difficult. You just get a hard mortar set up on all your bricks, and if it cracks, you chip it off. And whereas if it's sand and clay, you can just wet it down and seal it up. So I don't recommend adding premix refractory to fire clay and sand. It also just makes the premix refractory less good. So if you're buying premix refractory for a reason, you should use it as built. Use it for what it's designed for, the way it was designed. Don't try changing the formula. I've gone down that road. I've made that mistake myself over and over again. I added perlite to it to try and make insulated mixes. I added clay and sand to try and bulk it up. It never worked very well. So buy castable refractory if you have a use for it in its purchase state, and use it as such, but I don't recommend trying to modify it. I'm going to get through his question and I'll come back to chat. He's just got a couple more here. He asked about fuel overloading that he talks about. Peter and I both use it. We call it overfueling, and it's when you get black smoke out the chimney. And he says, I heard you mention that changing wood, possibly larger pieces, could make changes. And overfueling is a pretty simple concept to understand. Fuel, your wood stove, your rocket stove is burning a fuel-air mixture, just like your car. And your carburetor takes your fuel and your air and mixes those two together in the appropriate ratios to try and get them to burn cleanly. If you put too much gas, let's go the other way, if you put too much air in, you're just heating up a lot of extra air, and it usually shows up as like some steam coming out the other end of the chimney, and you're not as efficient because you're heating up more air than you need to. But if you go the other way and you have too much fuel, well, now you don't have enough oxygen to burn it. So you're going to blow that unburned fuel out your chimney. And that's going to look like black smoke typically. It's the unburned, burnable elements in the exhaust gas that should have been burned. And so what that means is you just have more wood off-gassing than the amount of air can keep up with. There's a few ways you can take care of that. You can have less surface area of your fuel, right? Less surface area, or larger pieces of wood will have less surface area to off gas, so you'll have less gas, less fuel going into the stove per moment of time. You can use fuel that is maybe not quite as bone dry. I don't ever recommend using wet fuel, but you might just have like just tinder for fuel. Like larch, where you live, Belgian Gulch, is when it's dry, it's just tinder. You might just need to get big chunks of it and maybe tone it down with some less volatile fuel to try and get less fuel gas into there. And lastly, if you just have black smoke coming out, a lot of times what happens is the firebox will heat up, and when you're loading your third load of wood, everything's so hot it's just flashing off all your wood gas. So if that's the case, insulated fireboxes help a lot because they won't blast that heat, from a fire brick right back onto that wood until it's burning again. But another thing you can do is just load less fuel. Just put in one stick at a time. And you'll just have to play with that. And again, that's going to be a function. It's going to change with the day. If you're drafting really hard, it's easier to overfuel because you can pull more fuel into the combustion chamber and there's less time for it to be consumed. So play with your fuel size, play with your fuel type. You could try closing off the primary a little bit and trying to, leave the air going in the secondary, but close off the primary so we're not creating as much wood gas in the firebox. So that's overfueling. Hopefully that made sense. And coming back to his questions. Okay. I think that's all for there. So I'm going to come back in the chat here and catch up to you guys. So, Jaron Diedrich, late to the party. Did you discuss Peter Vandenberg stove designs? We always talk about Peter's stove designs. I mean, we really are sharing, my stoves share a lot of elements as Peter's, and I do sell my batch box plan, which is basically Peter's plan. So we're always talking about Peter's stuff. If you have a specific question, please ask. We don't really just go over them generally, but we can certainly handle any questions you got. So, one Lilinian says I had a house fire as a kid in a barn, lost grandfather. Oh, wow. One Lilinian, that's terrible. Yeah, this is pretty serious stuff. And so it is important that hopefully we put out responsible content and that you guys are out there following people who, at least are trying to give you information based on experience. And yeah, anyways, I appreciate you guys for all those comments. That really means a lot to me. That I watch some of those videos, the ones that frustrate me, and I just get so frustrated because I don't know how to share with people that might not be something they should be listening. That I don't think that is good information to be shared out there, but it's hard to do without looking negative and talking bad about someone, and I don't mean to do that. So I am really just looking out for the community, and I really am just trying to make sure that we continue to move forward and don't put ourselves back 15 years, which is pretty much exactly where they are. So anyways, that's my frustrations with that. So let's see. Chimney fire in your preteens. Yeah, chimney fires. I mean, box stoves just don't make any sense, do they? Yeah, Sally Mifari, premix is formulated. Really great. Thank you for putting that into such nice words. So Leon says, honey insulated external chimney with aircrete. Cheap, affordable for that application. It does not get that hot. Reason he does external chimney condensation and insulated external chimney. Insulated chimneys do work better. Leon, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. But vermiculite would be way better. Aircrete isn't terribly insulating in my opinion. It's still a pretty high mass material. You're right. It won't be damaged out there in the external chimney. I had noted that he just used it everywhere. Again, to me, it's the wrong material everywhere he's using it. He's using it in the firebox where it's not going to hold up and it's high mass. Using it out there for insulation, it's relatively high mass. You'd be, I think, money ahead and time ahead in terms of labor. Your exhaust, your chimney, you could just use fiberglass insulation if you're burning it correctly. Well, maybe not fiberglass, but super wool anyways. But perlite would be a great choice. Poured in between those two things. There's, again, that's fine. He can run his. I don't think it's terribly dangerous out there in the chimney. I just don't think it's good advice. So let's see. Vermiculite and fire cement is absolutely possible, Asbjorn. That's a good way to go. Although I don't know that you'd really even need the fire cement. I think you could just do loose vermiculite for chimney insulation. So Sally Mufari says, I've seen some talks on insulation. As odd as this sounds, the indoor ski area built in Oman, 12 feet of air was the best insulation they'd come up with, basically a very large double wall. That's really interesting, Sally Mufari. I actually wondered how they did that. I've seen those indoor ski areas in the desert, and I wondered how they insulated them. So they must just have basically climate control in a separate in that insulative area as well. And if they can keep that climate controlled there and keep that from transferring, that'd be excellent insulation. And one lineage says if houses start burning down, they will outlaw RMH. It's true, and you know, I mean, homemade wood stoves of any description are generally frowned upon for good reason, and so we do need to be careful, because I feel like rocket stoves are very safe when done, you know, the way that we typically share. But we just, when we have these tangents, we start to enter into areas where people could create something really dangerous without really knowing what they've done. So, yeah, anyways. So, yeah, well, you're welcome to ask, Jaron, if you have a specific question. Don't, you know, but we'll be here next week too. So anytime, you know, you come and ask any questions about your builds. So Silent Fire says, crazy thing about that is the creosote is the problem and the thing one tries to avoid in making RMH. And that's exactly it. We talked about it last week. You know, box stoves are just, it's insane how dangerous they are, right? With the creosote and the chimney right adjacent to the combustion zone. And, I mean, it's amazing that they're legal at all. To be honest, I thought about, you know, I actually thought about my risk as a landlord and renting out my home with an RMH. And I was like, gosh, do I put a box stove back in there to be, you know, to lessen my liability? And I was like, that raises my liability. I mean, it lessens my liability regarding the insurance company, but my chances of a house fire go through the roof, in my opinion, especially with uneducated people running it. You know, they're the ones who are going to just shoot flames straight up the chimney. So I have strong feelings about that. So Robin says, the Peacelet Firebox 426 door does not seem to have a secondary air opening built in. Okay to just adjust brickwork to accommodate rectangle pipe opening below the Peacelet door. Robin, if you look at my plans, what you'll notice is there's a plan sheet that says Firebox flange. And that Firebox flange has a door opening and a secondary air opening. So those are both... where am I here? That flange goes behind the Peacelet door, and that Peacelet door is large enough that it occludes all of that door flange. So when you open the single air control on the Peacelet 426, that control is feeding both your primary and secondary air on the internal door flange. So we actually just have a single control on the external, and that controls all your air. So no, you won't be making another hole below. Just take another look at those plans and you'll understand when you see that door flange. It's different than mine is there. It's as if the door was bigger, longer, and engulfed that lower opening as well. So that's a change in the past couple years, as that we discovered. We talked about a few weeks ago here on the chat, something that came up on Donkey's board, and most of the batch boxes are starting to go to that single air control now. So yeah, it's a really easy way to go. There's nothing to figure out there. It's that's why that's why I changed the plans to that style, because with that Peacelet off the shelf door, all you need to do is cut that two-dimensional door flange, mount it to some angle iron back in there, door goes out on the face, done deal. So there you go. And Tyler Mafari says the air intake for secondary is almost in line with the damper in the door, so it is well fed. You nailed it, my friend. You nailed it, Sally Mafari. I hope I'm saying your name correctly, my friend. You've got a great handle on this stuff. I appreciate you that you're here. So Marie, the clean burn on the RMH was what attracted me, plus using 1 cord versus 7 for a winter. Yeah, it's a big deal. I went from 10 cords down to like 4, I think, down in the big house, and about 2. I'm saying it right. All right, Sally Mufari, fantastic. Really, really happy to hear that. Thank you. So yeah, Marie, it's a huge thing. They can change your life for the better for sure. And I just got to get them. We just got to get people in front of them. Just got to get these stoves, people sitting on them and using them, because once you've lived with one, I don't think you'll accept anything else. Like I said, I keep thinking about going back to a box stove, to fit the rules better. And I think about the reality. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. It's more dangerous. It's less efficient. I'm not doing it. So there you go. So all right, you guys, we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes. I think that's probably enough for today. Unless anyone has any last questions you want to sneak in under the wire. I think I'll start heading out here, and we can think about next week. So I did reach out to some of my stove building friends, and I'm hoping that we'll have another guest on here in the coming weeks. I think I've got a real good one lined up for you. So I won't spoil the surprise, because I haven't heard back as to whether he can do it or not. He's in a radically different time zone, so we'll see if we can make it work. But Marie Waters asks, cheeks of soapstone. Yeah, Marie, I don't know. You're talking about inside the firebox as protection. I think potentially. I think it'd be worth a try. Soapstone is kind of out of my price range out here on the West Coast, and that's why I don't know. I'd love to try it myself, and the reason I'm kind of hesitating is because it is kind of expensive. And so if you just stick it in there and in 2 burns, it cracks from heat shock. I'd be sad if I steered you that way and you spent $200 on 2 big slabs of soapstone to stick in there. But soapstone does have like the best thermal, response characteristics of any stone, and if anything's going to work, I think it would be a good choice. Sure would look nice. So I think it's probably worth a try. A lot of fireplaces built out of soapstone over the millennia, but I can't tell you for sure that it'll work. I just don't know. So there you go. Marie Waters, Sally Mufari says the Fouch family also helped me learn that bit about fuel needs. Fouch family's awesome, you guys. I'm a big fan. I don't always keep up with them, but every time I catch one of their videos or something, I really appreciate. Same kind of deal, man. They just speak real, true. I just feel like they're really sharing, and they're not trying to influence you one way or the other. And I really appreciate it. So yeah, great community, One Little Indian. Thanks to all of you guys. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys all being here. So we'll be back next week. Let's do it again next Wednesday, 11 a.m. Not sure if I'll have a guest then or not, but I'll definitely be there. You guys, come one, come all. Tell the other rocket stove builders on your forums to come hang out, share your builds. Let's get some photos going, and let's keep talking. So, Sally Mufari, you weren't over enthusiastic. That is exactly what I'm here for, and exactly what I'm hoping for, man. Actually, that makes these chats to have someone out there, have you guys out there with questions. It's what makes it. So come back, keep them coming. Thanks for being here, and I really appreciate it. So much love to all of you guys. Jeremiah Shine, I almost missed you there, bud, but I'm really happy to see you. I got to run, my friend, but next time, try and make it next week. I'd love to hear about your most recent builds and your experience over the past years with your Walker stoves. So, all right, you guys, that's enough for today. Hope you have a great Wednesday, great rest of the week. Thank all of you. Really love this chat. Myself, Marie, Augustus, Tall Shadow, Sally Mufari, One Little Indian, Jeremiah, Leon. I'm not going to be able to get them all. There's way too many of you guys now. I'll just say goodbye to everybody. All right, you guys, I'm going to hit the video and say goodbye. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next week. Have a great day, you guys.